So I want to welcome you to our virtual programming showcase. And today we're going to hear from 6 librarians across the state and how they've begun to integrate virtual programs into their community engagement initiatives as we continue to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. When the time comes, I'll allow them to better introduce themselves, but today we'll hear from Christina Leroux in her Zoom trivia program, Abby Lynch and how she turned the board game Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective into a virtual program, Molly Varello in her online Choose Your Own Adventure program, Tori Barrett and how she creates virtual escape rooms, Allison Murphy's Kitchen Science program, and Michael Robbins' online Dungeons and Dragons program. Each librarian will speak for about 10 minutes, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So I'll ask you to put any questions you have in chat. So first, we're going to hear from Christina.
Oh, let me unmute. Hello. So I'm the head of children's services at the Ridgefield Library. And just my little tagline, let's be extra together, because it just seems that whenever the group of us who put these types of programs together, we just make it so extra. So just keep that in mind when I'm going through my my few slides here. There are definitely simpler ways to do this, but we have been doing this for we've done 4 sessions now, I think, and it has been very successful, and it has a little bit of wow factor so that it really pulls our patrons in and engages them. Next slide, please. So trivia Ridgefield style. I have, you know, we call them my RidgeCon team of John Casiello, Shay Glass, Meg Klein, Kathy Pickle, and Jenna Dubin. We've been working together. We rotate in and out for creating and running the trivia. I highly recommend having more than just yourself. I think 3 people is a great number to have in order to run the trivia as we do effectively. And we approach it with the idea we want to engage and have it be UX focused. So we want to make sure that graphics are engaging and it's easy to use, it's easy to navigate, and it's just fun. And I'll show you throughout, as you can see, like just some screenshots on the bottom of this slide of all of the slides that we use for our trivia. We try to keep it branded and consistent thematically, just to give it a cohesive feel. And it's good branding. Next slide, please. I'm talking really fast because I only have 10 minutes. I apologize. So, let's see. No, you're right. Structure 1. Next slide. Thanks. Perfect. So, just briefly, we structure our trivia. It's generally about 2 hours. We generally start at 6:30 with a 30 minutes intro where we can give reminders to the players and introduce staff and all of that, while also creating the breakout rooms behind the scenes. So we give generally 30 minutes, and with constant reminders to rename yourself with your team name / your name. This proves to be the most important thing for us on our Zoom trivia when sorting people into teams. We put it in our emails to them, in all of the messaging to them. Team name / your name. That makes it much easier when you're opening up the breakout rooms in Zoom to sort them quickly and easily into their teams. So I've gotten that down to like 15 minutes for about 80 people. So it really helps. And also, with anything else, practicing helps. So just a couple of breakout room tips. Always check the options on the bottom before opening to all rooms. So if you take a look at the second image on this slide, it's just a little screenshot to make sure that you just check these settings, because I've done it before and I've sent people out to a break room for 2 minutes for their warm-up round and then forgotten to change it, and they really needed 8 minutes in the next round. So it kind of disrupts the flow of the event if you're in and out of break rooms. So what we have added after our first couple was a warm-up round, which we have about 5 to 10 minutes. And this helps you to test the breakout rooms, make sure everybody is in the right room. You know, we've had issues before where there were teams that named themselves the same thing. So we pop them in the room and they're like, we don't know these people. So this is a good way to like figure that out. Also, we use Google Forms to submit our answers. So it gives them a chance to play with the form, submit an answer, and talk about who they want to submit their form, because we ask that one person per team submits it. The answers for our warm-up round aren't scored, but it just gives us a little few minutes to address any lingering tech issues or questions that some people might have. Next slide. Thank you. So the bulk of our trivia is 4 rounds, about 20 minutes each. Each round has 10 questions. We repeat each question 1 time, and then we break them into teams between 5 to 7 minutes, depending on either how hard the trivia is and how much conversation they might need to have, or if we require lots of typing for their answers. So if we are asking them for a song title and an artist, we want to give them a little more time to type up their answers into the sheet. If it's a multiple choice, which is really great for scoring, they don't need as much time because they're just, you know, clicking their buttons. When we put them into breakout rooms, we have a designated person who scores. Open up the Google form to accept answers and then close it down again once the breakout session is over. This really helps with making sure that no one can get into and submit answers before, and then they're locked out from submitting answers, or going in after the sessions have closed and changing answers or anything like that. So we found that this is the best way to do it, and it's one person's designated job. So after we break out, we come together again, and we give the answers while the scorers are scoring in the background. And then we do a little theme or costume show off. We started by doing a costume contest, but it's not sustainable because you have to mail prizes and all of that. So we kind of just moved it to like show off your costume. So we did, you know, a Harry Potter theme, a Disney theme. We did a 80s, 90s theme. And the last one we just did was a 2010s decade theme. So the first 3 were really great, and we could be like, hey, show us your costumes. We can spotlight their image. They can do a little dance, say a couple words. It's something to give our scorers a little time to score it, and it's just a nice little diversion. And it's really great because we try to make it family friendly, so that the questions, there's some questions that, you know, kids could answer as well, and they love to show off all of their stuff. So after that is done, we'll give a score update. If it's done, if they need more time, then we kind of just move on to the next round and we'll update the scores later. And recently we added a trivia sudden death round, which honestly has taken all kinds of forms, and it hasn't been smoothed out for us. But last time we did like a meme it, and we showed a meme, and we had all of our breakout groups go into their groups again and just put text into a meme, and then we showed them off and had a little poll. That's a little extra, and but it was really fun. And the Harry Potter one, we had some like really, really hard Harry Potter questions just to break any ties or just wrap up the night with something fun, and you know, it can be less competitive that way. Next slide. Okay. Oh, skip this. I thought I deleted that. Skip that slide. Thank you. Okay, there we go. That's a little weird, huh? Can you try going forward and back again with the slide? That image is not supposed to be there. And then go back. There we go. Perfect. So we're using Google Forms. The reason why is because it's super organized and it's easy to customize. We can control how and when people submit their answers. And they can also be all fed into one spreadsheet for tracking the scores. If you do multiple choice questions, it can be auto graded, so you don't even need a physical person keeping score. And you can share it very easily. If you're familiar with Google Forms, we created a form for each round. And very important, always make sure that a required field is the team name, because you'll get some without team names and then you're just like, oh my gosh. So, for example, our trivia that we have been running, we've had, around, you know, it's maxed at 100 for our Zoom, around 90 login, and then there's multiple people at each location. So we have between 20 and 30 individual teams. So it's really important that, with the breakout sessions, that their team names are organized, and also that they put their team name on their answer form. If they don't, then unfortunately, because there's so many of them, they don't get the credit. And that's just something that we've kind of learned over the past few weeks. Next slide, please. And slides for questions. So lots of online trivia and Zoom trivia have used different formats and platforms. Using Facebook Live is a great way to do it too. It's a great way to do it. It's not how we're doing it. I'm advocating for the use of slides because you can embed the multimedia. You can do video and sound as well. You can also, multiple people can work on a slide, a presentation at one time, and it's so much easier to share it on the screen, and you don't have to type out questions in a chat. Everything is right there. So for our format, it's about 80 slides. With an intro slide, our warm-ups, our rounds, and then with our answers and our sudden death. There's a lot of, duplicating of slides once you get a style right. So it seems like a lot, but it's not actually too terrible. Next slide, please. Okay. So the other part that we do, and I highly recommend, is having a landing page, if you're able to, for all of your rounds. So as I mentioned, we create a form for each round for our patrons to submit, and it's nice to contain it in one area. So if you have access to your website, or if you have LibGuides, we're using LibGuides for this. We just got it. It's amazing. It's just the easiest thing in the world. And you can just put all that information in one place with, the rules, how to team, how to submit answers, and then all the links to the individual forms that they need to go to. So you don't necessarily have to share individual round links in a chat every single time. If people, lose the page on their browser or something, you can just dump the same link into the chat every time. We've also, the first couple times we didn't have this, so we used just an email. That does mean people need to make sure they bring up their email and all of that. Other options, you could do a shared Google Doc, or you could even PDF it with active links and send that out to people as well, as other options. Because we like to make it look pretty, and email doesn't always do that easily. So PDF, you could make a nice pretty document, save it as a PDF, and share that as well. Next slide. This is my last slide, don't worry. So some of our tips that we have learned over the past couple months, we're working on our 5th trivia this time. They've all been really well attended, and is to practice. So you get your slide all together, open Zoom and practice it. Practice sharing your screen and sharing your sound, making sure that you know which settings you need to check off before you get started. Get a couple of people from your staff or family or someone to just practice breaking them out into rooms and playing with the settings and creating names. And then also using the chat feature and the hand raising feature. We use the hand raising feature when we do our little in-betweens for people to show off their costumes. We ask them to raise their hand, and then we'll feature or spotlight their video. And then test your Google Forms and any of your embedded sound or videos. I found that you can't click on anything else if you're playing something on your slide while also sharing it. So we figured things out the hard way and made mistakes along the way. And everyone has been very understanding and just very happy about it. But our other thing is just make it as easy as possible for the patron. So you want the patron's experience to come in, they get in here, like all the directions are there, you tell them exactly what they need to do, and you provide the links and things for them to use and make it as easy as possible. Our suggestions are, be creative with how you present questions. Our questions are a variety of things from like, I identify, we did, uh, superhero characters from Marvel, and we just did their eyes, and you had to identify who the character was from that. We do lots of sound clips. We did, TV themes, all kinds of things like that. And then, be consistent with your design on your slide so each round looks the same. Also, keep things to one side of the screen so people's Zoom bar can show up on the side. Keep it moving. Try to keep it for 2 hours. Our first one was 3.5 hours. Our last one was 1 hour and 45 minutes. So as you get to do it and you can move it along, that's great. And then just as it says, assign specific roles to specific people on your team so that you can keep it moving. And that's really it. If you have any questions, feel free to email me I'm happy to literally share wholesale slides and wholesale presentations and have any conversations after this. So thank you.
Hello, I guess I'm next. Thanks, Christina. That was awesome. I'm Abby Lynch, and I am a youth services librarian at the Brookfield Library. The age group I'm focused on primarily is 6th grade through 12th grade, so I will be talking about a teen program that I ran called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is a game that I had played before we were doing everything virtually, and it's not quite a board game, but more of a storytelling game. It's available through it's published by Space Cowboys, and I put the link there if the slides get shared at the end, or I can share that with anybody at the end. They have a couple of different boxes of this game, and how it works is it's almost like a choose your own adventure group that you're playing as a collaborative game. The players are Baker Street irregulars who are helping Sherlock Holmes solve crimes, and the scoring is kind of involved by trying to solve it in using fewer leads than Sherlock Holmes. So this is the part where I'm explaining a game and it sounds kind of complicated and boring, but your friend's like, no, it's fun. It's fun, you'll like it. That's kind of how it is. I would definitely recommend playing it first. I will say, I think it's a little bit hard to find these days. My kind of game group had a copy I was looking at on Amazon. However people feel about that, there are a couple of copies of this red box. But if you have a local game store that's either opening up soon or doing curbside, it would definitely be worth giving them a call to see if they have anything available. The players use a map and a directory and newspapers to follow leads and kind of choose the next part of the choose your own adventure story. And the person presenting, which in this case was me, reads the little blurb that's at each address or with each person. The cases stand alone, so you don't need it to be a consistent group every time, but the materials do build up. The newspapers go chronologically, so it's just kind of keeping track of what you need to send to who. And Space Cowboys, actually how I decided to turn it into a virtual program is that they released a lot of the materials that you need, the newspapers, the everything except for the actual game book, which I don't know if you can see my video here, but the actual game book they released online, so you could share it with your friends that you're going to play a group with, and you just need one person to have the actual box, so you would have the story. I was using this so the case is standalone, but the materials build up, with the exception of, in this red box, there is a set of 4 Jack the Ripper mysteries, which if you're doing an adult program with a consistent group, maybe, but it's definitely not teen appropriate in a library context. But the West End adventures are fine. I think the game's rated like 14 plus on their website, but I did a lot of checking around for what parents and other players recommended if people had played it with their younger kids, and kind of settled on an age group, but it's something that you would definitely want to read first. Next slide. Oh, maybe try going forward and back in again, or it's just maybe taking a minute to load. Oh, there we go. So I think I've kind of repeated myself out of order here, but I'll just kind of go over the basics of my program, and then if folks have questions at the end of everybody, I'll be happy to answer. We chose Google Hangouts to use. The kids in Brookfield use G Suite for Education, so they're very familiar with Google Meet. And also we have some conflicting program scheduling on our Zoom account, but you could use Zoom just fine, anything where the presenter is going to be able to share their screen. Our teen programs are usually grades 6 through 12. If I ran this again, knowing what I know, I would say 8th grade and up or age 13 and up. Although we had a 6th grader who wants to be a detective that handled himself just fine and was like super into it. So it definitely depends on the group of kids that you have. I will just say that it takes a little bit less reworking of some wording in the cases if you're not worrying about like 10 and 11-year-olds. Definitely budget at least 2 hours. The first session went the full 2 hours. Subsequent sessions have been definitely hitting the 1.5-hour mark, but it all depends on the route the kids take to get to the answer. So you want to give a lot of time to have them explore. And like I said, the scoring is to use as few leads as possible, but I encourage them to just play until they feel satisfied with the answer that they have and not worry about the scoring, because even when I've been playing with dedicated gamers, it's a really hard game and the scoring's really not very forgiving. So it's more about the experience of solving the case and visiting all these different people and talking to them. Just a heads up, if anyone tries it, it's a lot of reading for you. Have your water, read through it ahead of time, be ready. You'll be spending most of the time reading. Oh, I think I forgot to mention before with the budgeting of time and in combination with the reading, it's a lot of listening for the kids. So I definitely encourage them to, like, if they needed to get something to play with while they were listening, just give them a heads up at the beginning that they'll be doing a lot of listening. Like I said, definitely try and play it first so you understand how the gameplay works, and read the case ahead of time. I, in the most recent one, hadn't played that particular game before, so I read through it and actually in the book kind of made some edits so that I wouldn't forget to switch words around. But it's on the whole pretty friendly. It's Sherlock Holmes, so like all of the murder and stuff is relatively genteel, but just kind of keeping in mind that the target age group, with adults it would be fine. And I did provide content warning at the top of the program that it is a murder mystery. There's going to be some violence. Again, this is where you kind of need to know your population, and read the case and see what you're comfortable with. I haven't played through all the cases in the box. I imagine that there might be ones that I would gravitate towards and ones that I wouldn't. The first group of kids that I had really liked it a lot. I had 8 teens. They were definitely mystery fans. One came with his like deerstalker cap ready to be Sherlock Holmes. They had really good teamwork. I had to like get up and take care of my barking dog at one point, and that's when, once I was like not in the room anymore, that's when they like really got into the teamwork, and you could just hear them really digging into the case. So that was really fun. I had a second group that I almost called Kim and was like, I can't present. It was such a flop. So it definitely depends on the group that you have and trying to be as clear in your marketing, like what the game is, which I don't even know if I've explained it well. So I'm sorry about that. But then that first group came back to play a second case and they absolutely loved it again. So it's definitely, it definitely depends on the kids and their interest level. I capped it at 8. I would say it's probably best for 4 to 6 players, but with an engaged group, 8 was no problem. I think if you started getting more than 8, it would take a little too long for the conversations to take place. I think with adults, a smaller group is fine, or a larger group would be fine. But for teens, I would say somewhere between 4 and 8 would probably be the sweet spot. And I think that's everything. I hope I explained the game well. It's kind of a complicated one to explain without playing, but just let me know if you have any questions.
Molly, are you all set? So let me try to unmute her. She's um,
All right, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. So hi, I'm Molly. I am the head of the Children's Services at Southington Public Library. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about how to do a choose your own adventure. And mine is a little bit campy, like all the best choose your own adventures are. So let's get going. Next slide, please. All right. Let's see. So how to come up with your idea. I made my choose your own adventure through Google Forms. I'm not going to give you a tutorial on how to use Google Forms. There are a million everywhere, and I can link you to some much more eloquent tutorials than I would. I'm going to talk to you about how to think about your idea and figure out what your audience is and things like that. When I talk about this type of programming, I always try to focus on what you as a librarian or the person who is doing this program find to be awesome. And then how can you adapt that for your patrons? Because if you're super involved in whatever your idea is, they will be too, hopefully. So we have to think about what kind of adventure do you want to go on? Is it going to be a mystery? Is it going to be more of the survival side of things? Is it going to be based on a video game or a popular like book series? And then of course you got to keep in mind your audience, who you're doing this for, what your patrons' humor is like, so that type of thing. Being a children's librarian, my ideas tend to go in the younger direction, just because when you're doing programming for kids, you know, you kind of have to. But it helps you to figure out what their choices can be for this this game, and what kind of clues you give, and how you phrase things in a way that they'll understand the best. So as you can see, I chose Super Mario Brothers. This game is super popular in our library. We have different like platforms that kids can check out so they can play all the time, and they're always checked out. We do a Super Smash Brothers tournament at our Comic-Con that's always packed and popular. And our Comic-Con was coming up, but then it was canceled because of all of the craziness that's been going on. So I wanted to kind of stick in the same vein of that, which is why I settled on Super Mario Brothers. So it's okay for your idea to evolve as you write it, which is, I had started doing this and I wanted it to be an escape room, but as I got typing everything out and figuring out what I was going to do and what things I wanted to highlight and things, it just worked better as a choose your own adventure. So it's okay for things to evolve, like Mario in my picture here. Next slide, please. Oh, it's doing that thing again, maybe forward and backwards. There we go, perfect. So I was an English major, is what my bachelor's degree was in, so we're all about writing out your story structure. So when you're doing a choose your own adventure story, you have to have choices. And of course there could be a bit of adventure, maybe some mild peril, a little bit of mystery, but every choose your own adventure story has to have, you know, choices. Even if they end up at the same outcome or several outcomes, it's best that you know exactly where you're going and how you're going to get there. I've included this little decision tree. I would show you mine, but my Super Mario Brothers decision tree was lost to the wastebasket of time. But it was just like this, and it's crazy when you actually write everything out and figure out where it's going to lead, how it gets there. So 100% use a decision tree to map out whatever way you're going. And it helps you just keep everything straight. So the way that Google Forms work when you are breaking down questions and things like that, if it's going to a different section, you have to make a different box, and you just have to make sure that you link which decision goes to which box, and then it separates it from there. Your story can be very simple or much more involved. That's up to you and what your audience is. But I like to theme it around popular characters and stories that kind of exist, and you kind of draw from the source material. And then if you're doing something for all ages, it's really fun to throw like Easter eggs and things like that for your older patrons. So if younger kids are playing, they'll still enjoy it, but the older ones will get something a little bit more, and it just takes practice. So it's things like, what kind of creatures does Mario encounter? What are their sounds? Like, what are the big bosses that he fights and has to defeat, and things like that, which is what makes it really, really fun. Next slide, please. So as you are fleshing out your story, make sure you know where it's going. That's your know your ending. So there are generally 2, 4, 5 main ways that choose your own adventures go, but of course they can be unlimited given your imagination. So it's usually the protagonist is captured, killed, acquires treasure, finds love, or fails in his or her quest. If you're doing something for very small children, I would advise against going with killing off your protagonist, so we don't have any emotional scarring. But there should be a handful of endings throughout the story that just cut the story short. I know a couple of mine. I can put the link in so you can go and play the digital escape room if you would like to, or not the escape room, the choose your own adventure, because it's still up and running. And it ends it, and you can play through multiple times and see if you can get different answers, and it's really fun that way. But there are portions where it just cuts everything off because you made that choice to eat a specific flower or something, and it like makes you wake up and you realize it was all a dream. Next slide, please. So as you're writing your escape room, try to avoid big blocks of text with nothing to break it up. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm reading something and there's no dialogue, or if it's dry, then it's really difficult to stay involved and engaged. What's great about Google Forms is you can break up the text with images and sounds and all kinds of crazy things, and it's really, really fun. I threw in some sounds that the creatures made to kind of signals that something else was coming up ahead. Anytime the player made a decision that moved them forward, they would get like a lap sound that kind of harkens back to the games. Just things that are unexpected and fun. Let's see. So I started with my mild-mannered plumber, which is Mario, but what is he gonna do? What does he do in the games? He tries to rescue Princess Peach. And then when he succeeds in rescuing her, what happens? Do they celebrate? Maybe they go on a picnic. It's all about setting up what's happening and all of that. Next slide, please. Oh, it's a little bit, this silly thing. Can you go for it? Yeah, there we go. So a lot of choose your own adventures, as I said, they're campy and they're funny, but in like a strange and weird way. And that campiness is part of the genre, and it's what makes it fun. So definitely play into that and tap into your own innate humor. And I feel as librarians, we're all pretty silly, and it's pretty great. As always, they are always framed in the second person. So when you're writing it, it's you are Mario, the mild-mannered plumber, and what do you choose to do? So it's kind of making sure that the person who's reading it is feeling like they are doing the action. Next slide, please. Oh, it looks like it's a little bit gummed up a bit. So this one is actually you're just seeing the pipe and everything, so you can ignore that little thing that's off to the side. And it's just kind of like a placeholder to say, when you're doing a choose your own adventure, you're going to have like a binary choice of, are you going to do this or not? But try to avoid yes or no answers because it makes it a little bit bland. Try to make it dynamic, and you can of course have more than 2 answers, but they start to get a little unwieldy. So I would say have 2 answers, just try to avoid yeses and nos. Next slide, please. There we go. Triple check everything. As with everything that everybody has said before me, make sure that the story works and get as many people to test it before you send it out as possible to make sure that the videos work, that the audio works, that the choices actually lead where you want them to go. When you're creating it and you're in the thick of it, sometimes your brain stops working and you think it's going to go where you want it to go, and you don't realize that it doesn't if you don't test all the answers. Making sure that you have those testing friends set up, make sure that you don't frustrate your players and they don't get stuck in a loop where they keep answering questions, but it brings them back to a previous answer and they try to get to the next place, but they get stuck, and that's not great and super fun. So just make sure that you don't do that. And then that's pretty much it. It's just having fun and seeing what you can get up to and where your character wants to go, and just having fun with it. As always, if there's any questions, just shoot them to me at the end after everything, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is Tori Barrett. I am also a children's librarian at the Southington Public Library. Molly is my coworker, so good job, Molly. Thanks for the lead in. So I'm going to be talking about another program that we do at the Southington Library, and they are my digital escape rooms. You can go on to the next slide. So the first thing you want to do in making an escape room is select your theme. And the format that I use for making escape rooms is a website called Deck Toys. And I know that there are a lot of other escape rooms going around right now at libraries, and a lot of them are using like Google Sites or Google Forms, and that's totally one great way to do it. But I personally like Deck Toys better. I discovered that some teachers use Deck Toys to make escape rooms for their classrooms, and I really liked how much freedom you have with it, and you're not as stuck with your like creativity. When you're making one of the Google Forms escape rooms, it gets really complicated, I find, and I feel like this is much more accessible for the patrons, especially if they're for young kids. And my escape rooms are for ages 7 to 12, and I think that the other kind of escape room might be a little bit intimidating for those young kids, so that's why I chose to use Deck Toys. I'm not going to give you a tutorial on Deck Toys because it's really complicated, but we'll just go over the basics of how to make an escape room using it. So first of all, you want to think about who your target audience is and what are they interested in. I like to do a combination of themes. So I've done Harry Potter, Avengers, Star Wars, Percy Jackson, Wings of Fire, library, Disney princesses, pirates. I try to throw in a mix of literary things and pop culture things. In our library, we've been doing themes for our virtual programs each week. So we had like a Harry Potter week, and then we did a Star Wars week. So I'll pick whatever theme we're doing that week, and then I'll make an escape room about that theme. All right, you can go to the next one. All right, so you want to create your story, and similar to what other people have said, you want to have an end goal. So for example, oh, what happened? Uh-oh. I'm not sure what happened there. I'll keep talking while we try to get that up. So what is the goal of your escape room, and what character is your patron playing as? Are they playing as a pirate? Are they playing as a demigod from Percy Jackson? Are they going to be the actual character in the story, or are they going to be helping the main character from that theme that you've chosen? So that's the important thing to establish at the beginning. And you always want to have an end goal. So sometimes, like, yes, I call them escape rooms, but my Harry Potter one wasn't technically escaping. It was stopping Voldemort from reaching the Sorcerer's Stone. Or in the pirate one, it was uncovering the buried treasure. So sometimes it's escaping, and sometimes it's more of a trying to achieve a goal. And I always like to have a direction that I'm going. So as you can see in my Wings of Fire escape room that's on the screen, so I had Welcome to Pyrea, which is where it takes place, and then each clue is a cave where a different dragon is trapped, and you had to go through and free each of those dragons. So I used the dragons from the books to theme each clue, which was really helpful because it gave me direction and it gave me a theme for each clue. So for like the Mudwing Cave, I themed that clue around Mudwing dragons. And for the next one, for the Seawing Cave, I themed it around the sea and ocean. And so I like to theme each clue, and I like to plan out all the different clues beforehand before I even make them, just so I have a direction to go in. All right, you can go to the next slide. Oh, you can't really see it. Uh-oh. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a basic overview of the types of puzzles that I like to make. So as I said, the escape rooms are for kids 7 to 12, which is tricky because it is hard to create puzzles that are challenging for a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old. Because you don't want them to be so easy that the 12-year-olds get bored, but you don't want them to be so challenging that the 7-year-olds give up after 2 minutes because it's too difficult. So I try to do a mix. I'll do some easier ones and some harder ones. I started off doing easier ones in the beginning, and then I felt like as I progressed, if the theme was something that I felt was going to draw older kids, for example, Percy Jackson, those are really books for older kids. So I decided to make those a little bit more difficult. And I figure if younger kids want to play it, they're welcome to, but chances are they're going to be getting help from a grown-up or an older sibling anyways. So I made them a little bit more difficult if it was a theme that I thought was going to draw an older audience. But like the Disney Princesses one was a little bit easier, but I did throw a mix in of like easy and hard. So I'm gonna explain the ones I have on the screen briefly. So you can see I have like math puzzles, like the Star Wars one is a math puzzle, and it's similar to the ones you've seen going around online where each image stands for a number and you have to figure out which number each image represents, and then there's a solution. And then as you can kind of see in the screen, each of these has a little red lock on them. So that's how you would progress to the next slide when you're creating these puzzles. So what I do is I make them in Canva, and then I import those images into Deck Toys where it has a slideshow for your puzzle. So you can put locks on each slide. In order to move to the next slide, you have to enter an answer into that lock, and that answer has to be correct. But there are 2 different ways that you can make puzzles in Deck Toys. Deck Toys has pre-made games that we'll talk about on the next slide, or they have slides as these are seen here. So these are ones I made from scratch. And for example, you can see the book one in the right corner is a drag and drop puzzle. So each of those books, when you're in Deck Toys, you're able to create like a target field, and you can create a drag and drop from scratch. So each of those books can be dragged, and you were to drag them to the right shelf based on the title of the book, you can figure out what shelf they go in. So that was one for a Beast's library in my Disney Princesses room. You had to sort the books onto the shelf that they would belong on. So those types of things I make them in Canva, and then I put them in Deck Toys, and I can format them that way. It takes a lot of practice, especially with the drag and drop puzzles. But with trial and error, I think everybody could figure it out. I also do things like picture Sudoku. As you can see, my Marvel one in the right-hand corner is a very simple Sudoku puzzle using pictures, and you had to drag the symbols to the right spot so that it would solve the puzzle. And with the drag and drop, as soon as the puzzle is solved, that opens the lock and moves you on to the next page. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So these are examples of the Deck Toys pre-made games that you can do. So you can create jigsaw puzzles by uploading an image, and it'll automatically turn it into a jigsaw puzzle that they have to solve. It will do crossword puzzles for you. It will do word searches. It will also do sequencing. So this one in the right-hand corner, you can see I had events from Star Wars, and I had them drag them so that they happened in the correct chronological order. And then for my Marvel one, I have a matching one where you had to match the hero to the villain and that type of thing. And I do try to make a mix of things that are trivia based versus non-trivia based. So I do like math puzzles and logic puzzles where you don't have to have read the book or seen the movie to know the answers. But for the more themed ones like the Star Wars or the Harry Potter or the Marvel one, I did throw in some trivia because I assume if that escape room is interesting to you, chances are you've seen the movies or you've read the books to some extent. But I try to make it so that a lot of the puzzles you can solve without having too much trivia knowledge. So let's see. So yeah, I do try to do a mix of the slide puzzles and the pre-made games. The slide ones are definitely much more engaging, I have found. They are a lot more work because you're making them from scratch and you're making all the images in Canva or however you want to make them, Photoshop, whatever platform that you use. But they are much more time consuming, but they also add, I think, a much more personal touch to the escape room. So I do try to do a mix. If I have a lot of time available that week, so when I'm making escape rooms, I was making them every single week. And it is a lot of work. So if there were times where I was running out of time and I was like, I just need to finish this escape room, I would throw in a couple, like throw in a crossword puzzle or a jigsaw puzzle. And the kids do really enjoy those as well. But if you have the time, I would say the slide puzzles are much more engaging. And then sometimes I would do it. So with my Infinity War one, each stone had a slide puzzle and then an app puzzle. So it would be find the puzzle using this custom made one. And then in order to retrieve the stone, you had to do either a trivia one with their pre-made ones or a jigsaw puzzle or a crossword puzzle, that type of thing. So that worked really well because that was a really good mix of the two different types of puzzles. Deck Toys is intended as an educational tool for classrooms. So it's a little tricky. Some of the apps really only work in that format, in that they want you to put in like a short answer, or it's just much more geared for teachers and not as much for like a fun activity to do. So they're not, all of the pre-made ones are not really usable in this format, but quite a few of them are. You can go to the next slide. So in order to use the game apps, the pre-made ones, you have to make a study set, which again is designed for educational use, but you can make it work. And I put some examples. For example, when I was making my matching the heroes to the villains, you would just put the term would be the hero and then the definition would be the villain. And then you can match them that way. And then the one on the right is from a crossword puzzle. So you would just put the term on one side and then, you know, things like timbers and then shiver me blank. And then obviously the answer is shiver me timbers. And that's how it would come up in the crossword puzzle. All right, next slide. So as Molly said, testing is so important because you never know how something is going to work in someone else's device or in their browser. So, you know, Deck Toys is software and it doesn't always perform the same way on everyone's browser. So I always try to have as many people try it out as possible to let me know if there are any glitches or anything's not working. For example, I always have my sister try it out because she plays it on an iPad. And some things show up differently on an iPad than a computer. And it's usually a simple fix, but it's always helpful to try it out on different devices and different browsers to make sure that everything's performing the way you want it to. So I usually try to have it done about 2 days before I'm going to send it live to the public, just so that I have enough testers who've tried it out and make sure that it's not too easy, it's not too hard. Everything was straightforward. It was simple to understand what you were supposed to do in the slide. And that part is tricky to balance too, because you want it to be something the kids have to figure out. So sometimes you don't want to give too much instruction because you want them to figure out what they're supposed to do. But you also don't want it to be so frustrating that they give up or that they're like, this is stupid, and they stop. You want to make sure it's difficult, but not too difficult. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's a rundown of how I make my escape rooms. I know it's try to get through it really fast because there's a lot of information. But if you have any questions, you can email me or put a question in the chat and we can try to answer them later. So thanks. That's all I got.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Murphy, and I'm a children's librarian at Wallingford Public Library. And wow, I just have to say, coming after all of you before me on this presentation has made me feel very humbled. Your programs are amazing and thoughtful and smart and fantastic, and I can't wait to explore them some more. My program is called Kitchen Science. And you can go ahead, Gail, and advance the slide. This program started, the impetus for this was from a program that I've been doing at the library for a number of years now called the Break It, Make It Lab. The Break It, Make It Lab is a STEAM program for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And we meet once a month, and we do everything from food experiments to spyware to coding to making slime to rocket science, everything in between. And it's been really, really fun. And as all of you know, because I know you all probably do a lot of stuff like this at your own library, kids love anything that's hands-on. And they love the gross factor, they love the touching and feeling and doing. And so when we all started working from home because of the coronavirus, I thought, how can I employ some of these things with our families, but make it something that is not a program where they would need to have lots of specific materials. So I immediately thought about being in our own kitchens. And you can go ahead, Gail, to the next slide. Thank you. So Kitchen Science was born, and again, I really wanted to work with something that the families had in their houses. What we would do is we start the program on Zoom. We advertise our programs a week ahead of time. So in the constant contact email blast that goes out into all of our social media, we advertise the program, and we also advertise the ingredients that they're going to need. And my hope is that a lot of the stuff they already had in their house, but if the family was making one trip to the store a week, they could possibly pick up, a couple of simple things. But I didn't want it to be something that like popsicle sticks or even glue sticks they might not have at home. So I wanted it to be very simple things. We do the Zoom program, we register a week ahead of time, and I always have a coworker on the program Zoom call with me. So when I'm doing the actual experiment and giving the instructions, my coworker is there with me, and she's able to let people into the room. She's able to answer questions in the chat box if need be. We had an experience where a family couldn't get in, they had missed the link, so she was able to work on that. So I could do that on myself, but I could work on the program and she could work on helping the families in the group. The Kitchen Science group is generally for grades 1 through 5. So it skews a little bit younger than the Break It, Make It Lab. I've found that the majority of the kids who've been coming to the program have been 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Sometimes they have their younger siblings with them, which is great. And they generally have a parent either right there with them or in the kitchen around them. I ask them in the beginning to make sure they have all of their ingredients that we need in front of them. And so they can, make everything is right there. And I really try to take my time with them so that they can go step by step. And, kids have different levels of how much they know or how much they can do, or maybe they've done it incorrectly. So I really just try to take my time with doing it as best as I can. You can go ahead, Gail, to the next slide. So these are just 2 pictures of me in the last 2 that I did. You can see what I want to show you here is that I used 2 cameras for this, and that's really helped a lot. I have my makeshift desk. I have my laptop on a box so that I'm talking to the Zoom audience in front of me. And then on the side, I have a tripod and I have my iPhone on there, and that's pointed down to the ingredients that we're doing. So they can see my hands and they can see how much I'm pouring into a bowl or how many drops of something I'm putting into the mixture. And I found that really, really helps. I mean, it was a very inexpensive, something I bought on Amazon for $20 or something to get the tripod for my camera phone, and it's really helped a lot. And by doing this, we can kind of work all together. Some of the things that I've done so far, I've done 3 so far, and my coworker has done 1. We've made cloud slime. We made no-bake cookies. My coworker made ice cream where the kids poured the ingredients into a bag and then put ice and salt in another bag and then shook them all together. And then this Friday, I'm doing edible marshmallow Play-Doh. And we've got some, lots of ideas for things that are coming up in the future. We've got, cooking ideas, hands-on ideas. It's been really, really fun because it's simple. It's something the kids can really get dirty and get involved with, and yet they have a blast doing it. I didn't put anything on our slide here, but another program that we've done similar to this is before this all started and we started staying home, we did a kindness club with kids. And we would meet about every month or so, and we'd try to make something that either benefited nature, people, or animals. And we have done 2 kindness club programs so far online as well. We made rainbows and hearts together that we posted into our windows of our homes. And then the kids made thank you cards to medical personnel. And then I had them drop them off at the library. I had an envelope outside, taped outside on one of the doors of the outside library. And I gathered those up and we donated them to some of the medical staff in our town in Wallingford. So it's been really, really fun. I saw a question about posting some links. I've gotten all of my ideas for this on Pinterest, which, as you probably know, is an amazing source for information. If you'd like me to send you some specific links to some of the specific stuff we've done, just send me an email. Our email addresses are all at the end of this slide presentation, and I'd be happy to send things to you. It's been really, really fun, and I'm looking forward to keep on doing it for as long as we need to. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I am Michael from Katona Village Library, and I have just one slide, I promise. It's not that I'm lazy, or it's not just that I'm lazy, it's that I knew I was going last, and I figured everybody would be about ready to go. So I will try to say something quickly and a little bit different. I am the Engagement and Special Projects Librarian, which loosely translates as the Adult Services and YA Services Librarian in Katona. Although I don't know what's going on at your libraries, and mine titles don't mean a ton at the moment. We were down to a grand total of 3, a staff of 3 a couple of weeks ago. We are now ballooning up to a staff of 6, which I bring up not to be a downer, but to say that I don't have a team and I don't have time. So that has definitely informed my thinking when it comes to programming for young adults. My approach has been basically throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. And to my very great surprise and delight, just about everything has stuck these past months. I've been shocked. I don't mean in any way to make light of the current situation in the world, but it's kind of been a boon for young adult programming. We're running a 7-day-a-week schedule. Last Tuesday, I was using 2 Zoom accounts to run 4 sequential overlapping programmings, and I was thinking, this is nuts. I mean, if I had an actual library building to go to, I'd be watching the grass grow. It's an opportunity amidst crisis without teams and after-school clubs and organic connection. There are a lot of people who are hungry for that connection, and that's something that I found that we can give them. My approach has been to apply as little technology as possible, the bare minimum, which in most cases means just turning on the Zoom. So I'm open to doing more. I'm no Luddite. I like technology. I understand it, but it always seems to go best when I apply as little as possible. I'm going to highlight virtual Dungeons and Dragons because Kim Poe, who I'm sorry couldn't be here, and who I tip my hat to for organizing this, suggested I pull out one program to talk about. Dungeons and Dragons, I'm going to assume everybody has some awareness of it. You've at least watched Stranger Things or something. Basically, it's a role-playing game. In its traditional form, it's played around a table. There's a game master here called the Dungeon Master, who basically tells a story, and the players are characters in that story with some limited autonomy to make decisions, just like a choose-your-own-adventure game played in the landscape of the imagination. Each time a player tries to do something, a probability of success or failure is assigned and dice are rolled, and in this way the game progresses. Now, basically what I did was turn on the Zoom and let the teens figure it out. I mean, I'd very present in the early going to try to make sure everybody was getting along. And in fact, my work has been not in preparing elaborate plans or managing technology. It's been in managing humans. Put 10 teams in a room together to play a highly interactive, personality-driven program, and things can get really interesting. How did it all come together? I would say one of my bullet points on the side there, what's old is what's new. It's just years and years of keeping track of who wants to do what, keeping interest folders. The stuff that worked before the virus is the stuff that works now. Going in and finding out who are those people who mentioned D&D over the years. Well, now is our chance. We could never get everybody in one place at one time all those years, but now we can. And sure enough, they all turned up. I believe that young adult programs, at least with me, work best when they're actually run by the young adult themselves. So I found a teen dungeon master to run the campaign, and almost immediately ran full speed into a wall. The dungeon master got nervous, had tech problems. Weeks ticked by with people showing up to play a game, and the game never really progressed because the dungeon master just couldn't get it together. And that's the risk of putting it in the team's hands. But if it's relevant, if it's important, my message is it all worked out. They all wanted to be there. It's not so much that I had this brilliant idea of doing virtual Dungeons and Dragons. It's that their desire for connection, their desire to play overrode every other concern. So yes, Zoom is a tricky environment. You can't share a map. You can't look at figurines on the tabletop. There are technologies that will support those things if you have to have them. But my teams discovered they didn't need them. They brought their dice. They, if necessary, held up their smartphones and used a dice simulator, but they found ways around the obstacles. It's not so much the program that they were showing up for, it's each other that ultimately they were showing up for. So by facilitating, managing the players, if there were disputes, reaching out to people who had a bad week and were thinking of not coming back, that's where the work went. It was in the personal management, not in the game management, that paid off. And it's worked. I put on the one of my bullet points, nothing is impossible. We're doing crazy stuff, karaoke, improv acting, Monopoly, everything we throw out there seems to work. And the reason is they're showing up because they want to connect with each other. They want to see their friends. They want to see people. And this is a place to do it. As long as the conflicts are managed, and that's where where my work is going, they keep coming back. So why is this happening? Well, it's like I said, just knowing your people, treating every attendee as something precious, working each, sending those emails, sending the email blasts, encouraging the teams to spread the word themselves because it works so much better when they do it than when I do it. And again, I put it's not about us. The ideas that work best are the team's ideas, even when they're the same as my ideas. And here's what I mean. I once had this idea to do a teen zine program with the kids in my community. I threw it, I publicized it, social media, really put it out there. Guess how many people showed up? That's right, 0, not 1. We made one of the pages come up and attend, but that's about it. It was a total disaster. A couple of weeks later, I had one of the teen volunteers at the library say to me, I have an idea for a program. What was it? Teen Zine. I said, well, Isabel, I'm sorry, we just did Teen Zine and we had an attendance of 0. She said, trust me, it'll work out. Guess what? We were overflowing because it was her idea, because she publicized it, because she brought her friends. And those are the sort of networks that I find are not just persisting in an online environment, but are actually more than ever important on an online environment. As we transition into summer, with the school year winding down, with things opening up, how long will this go on? I don't know, but I plan to continue to ride this platform till it drops, and it shows no signs so far of doing so. My last point just had to do with Zoom security. I think some of the other presenters alluded to it, but especially with a savvy tween and teen group, they can find really creative ways to make mischief. So Zoom does give you options to remove their ability to unmute themselves, to limit who can screen share, whether or not you're able to send private chats. I just want to make sure, I'm sure most of you know this, but those are avenues through which they can really test their boundaries in the course of a program. And it can be a way to undermine that positive gaming environment, which over time can really start to peel off some players if they're unhappy. So that's it. Thank you. I hope I was quick and concise, and thanks a lot for including me.
So I wanted to thank all of our presenters for sharing their great programs with us today. We do have time for a few questions if you'd like to put them in chat. And also the presenters have their contact information here if there's anything specific you'll want to get in touch with them about. So let's just take a peek in the chat. Okay. There was an early on one asking for an address for the platform. I think that might have had to do with the deck toys at the time. I'm not sure if that was the question.
I'll pull up that link real
Amy
quick
had.
and I will put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And let me. Oh, and Molly also did put in the chat a list of all the escape rooms are
Yeah,
on
so those
your
are to the
website
actual
there.
This is the link right here is just for the platform. And just to be clear, there is a premium version, but you can totally do it without purchasing the premium version. We did it the first few weeks without it, decided to add it because there were a couple more puzzle options, but you definitely could easily do it without the premium version. So it's totally free if you want to.
And there's kind of a,
I see a
yeah, there's a kind of follow-up one about, do you choose your own escape rooms in a program, or do you just post on the site? How do you know how many have played, etc.?
So the way that we look at it, if you're doing it through Google Forms, it keeps track of the amount of people that play it, which is super awesome. And then for deck toys, we go by clicks from our Facebook page in eBlasts and various places that we put the links to whatever the program is. It's not 100% precise, but we found it as the most accessible. I know Tori can confirm this, but if you make, they can have it so you can make people sign in, so you can kind of see how many people like with that actual number, but we thought it was going to be prohibitive because when parents see that they have to create an account or sign in, they kind of automatically just don't do it. So we wanted to keep it accessible.
When you make an escape room, you can assign it to a classroom, and you can make a classroom like for your library, but then anytime anyone wants to enter that classroom, they have to log in through Google. And we felt like just that was too much of a barrier and would turn people off if they clicked on it like, oh, it needs me to sign in. Okay, never mind, I'm not going to do this. It's if you think your patrons would be fine with doing it, or if their parents are totally used to using Google, then that's a great way to keep track because you would be able to see exactly how many people had played. So that's definitely an option. What I usually do is I just make the escape room public and then I share the link on our Facebook page and then through our email and on our website. And when they click on the link, it's not the same thing as a classroom. It's basically the way you would share it with other teachers as opposed to entering it into a classroom.
And I see also, I think this might be geared to Allison. It says, can you share recipes and instructions?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. If you're interested, you can search, you can follow me on Pinterest, you can search Pinterest, or you can also just email me at my email address right here, and I'll be happy to send it to you.
And we just have a question about if this is being recorded, and yes, it is. And they will be posted probably next week when Kim is back. Is anything else anyone has? Give it just a few seconds if anybody needs to type a question. Oh, we're right at our end time here. So again, I just really wanted to thank all our presenters. This was fantastic. And all of you for attending the program and just have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.